Hey guys, so this is a follow-up video of the Bach with synth that I played, the 18th Goldberg variation. So I'm just going to talk about the synthesizer I used, the patch I used, how I kind of set it up, and briefly kind of talk about the piece itself. So if you're not familiar, the Goldberg variations are a series of variations that Bach wrote on a theme. So there's kind of this general bass line or chord progression, if you will, that all the pieces follow, and he just creates kind of variations on that one sort of harmonic theme. So this happens to be the 18th one, and it's called Canone alla sesta. So basically it's canon on the 6th, and a canon is effectively kind of like your row your boat, where like you play a piece and then the other, there's kind of like a call and response repetition, very loosely put. So there's a bunch of different canons in various different variations, all starting with different intervals. So you have like the unison canon, then canon on second, canon on third, and that just means like the interval of the repetition line. So this one, variation 18, happens to be a 6th interval. So you have sort of like a bouncing melody going, like one voice plays one melody and then the other one repeats it a 6th apart. So this is a fairly simple piece in terms of all the variations. It basically fits on one page. So if you're kind of trying to get into Goldberg variations, this is a good one to start with because it's relatively simple. I mean, it still requires a bit of practice to get the 3 different parts playing at the same time. But compared to the other variations, it's fairly kind of easy to digest. So yeah, if we sort of break it down, the way it goes is that you have the sort of 2 main melodies that are like the canon melody. So if I just play the right hand, we have the kind of canon melody. So you're kind of playing 2 parts with one hand. You have these sort of lower and upper bits. So once you get that down, then he kind of adds a bass line melody as well that kind of complements it really nicely. So most interpretations I've heard of this, they play it relatively fast, something like this. But I actually like the melody in a slower, and I couldn't find a slower interpretation anywhere. So I wanted to kind of record one, especially because I love this synthesizer patch. And I feel like when you play it slowly, you can really kind of get more of the emotion out of it. Whereas if you speed it up, it starts to sound more like canon-esque. Whereas if you slow it down, it becomes more like emotional, if you will. And then we go into the second part. This is one of my favorite parts towards the end. That bass line is so beautiful. Oh, it's so good. right, so that's the piece itself. So let me put this away. So let's talk about the synthesizer. So I'm using the Yuhi Repro 5, which is a virtual software synth that emulates the Prophet 5 synthesizers. And this is one of my favorite plugins. It sounds really, really good to the point where I almost feel like it replaces the hardware, minus kind of the tactile feeling of it. So the preset I found, which is becoming one of my favorite presets of any synthesizer I found ever, is by Howard Scar, and you can find it under the keys-synth category, and it's called HS Polysync. So one way that I've kind of tamed it to be more kind of smooth and flute-like is in Ableton Live. I've added this velocity plugin, which is a MIDI plugin which which kind of dampens your velocity curve, or allows you to shape it. So let me show you what the patch sounds like by default without the velocity curve. It has a much more aggressive response to velocity. And actually, let me lower the volume because it gets a little crazy. So if I didn't put the velocity curve, you would get this much more like hard sync kind of sound. So you can see the patch by default is very kind of aggressive, which is nice for like leads and stuff. But I wanted to have it a little more flute-like. So what I did is I added this velocity thing, and then I've kind of brought up the low end and brought up the high end, basically kind of squeezing the velocity curve so that regardless of the velocity I play, it'll always send kind of like a middle-ish velocity and kind of clamp it together. So this is what it sounds like. So now you can see that if I bring this up, we get that full velocity, but if I bring it down to around like 75, and then because the velocity is so low, the volume I needed to kind of compensate here. But then we get this beautiful patch. And then crucially, I've added some Valhalla Room reverb as a send effect in Ableton Live. Such a beautiful patch. It really has that like Prophet 5 characteristic. Then that piece that I played is in this register here. What I like to do sometimes is play Bach pieces an octave lower just to kind of get a different flavor out of them. And I think it's a fun thing to do, especially if you get bored of a song, to kind of transpose it up and down, and it kind of brings a new life to it. So this is what it would sound like if you played it an octave lower. And just to make it more fun, I'm gonna increase the velocity higher end here just to get a little more of that harshness. Try to play it a little bit faster. It's such an expressive patch. I love it. All right, thanks for watching. Check out Bach, listen to Glenn Gould's version, and a bunch of others. I'll catch you guys in the next one.